Did you know that Tom Cruise secretly appears as a mustachioed soldier? Charlie Sheen couldn't stop falling off horses, and the entire original musical score was thrown out for being too Irish. From a dressed-up sheep prank to hidden camera tripods in shootout scenes, Young Guns harbored some of the most bizarre behind-the-scenes secrets in Western movie history that will make you see this Brat Pack classic in a completely different light. Fact 1. Tom Cruise's secret cameo. If you blink during the final shootout scene in Young Guns, you'll miss one of Hollywood's biggest stars getting gunned down in disguise. Tom Cruise appears uncredited as a bearded soldier who gets shot and killed during the climactic battle at Alexander McSween's house. But you'd never recognize him under the elaborate facial hair and period costume. The unexpected cameo happened because Cruise was visiting his friend Emilio Estevez on the New Mexico set during filming in 1988. Director Christopher Kane thought it would be fun to get the Top Gun star into the movie, so he had the makeup department transform Cruise with a fake mustache and thick sideburns to make him look like a Civil War-era soldier. The disguise was so convincing that even eagle-eyed viewers rarely spot him without knowing exactly where to look. Cruise appears as the fourth person who gets shot when Charlie Baudry, played by Casey Siamasco, bursts out of the burning house firing his gun at around 1 hour and 39 minutes into the film. The moment happens quickly during the chaos of the escape sequence, with Cruise's character falling dramatically after being hit. Since he has no speaking lines and appears for just a few seconds, most audiences had no idea they were watching one of the biggest movie stars of the decade getting killed off in a Brat Pack Western. The cameo represents a perfect example of the casual, friendly atmosphere on the Young Guns set, where the cast and crew were willing to include visiting friends in the action. Cruise was at the height of his fame at the time, having just starred in Top Gun 2 years earlier, which makes his willingness to play a nameless soldier who dies instantly even more surprising. The fact that he did it completely uncredited shows it was purely for fun rather than any promotional purposes, making it one of cinema's most unexpected and well-hidden celebrity appearances. Fact 2. Charlie Sheen's horse disasters. Charlie Sheen may have played the level-headed leader of the regulators on screen, but behind the cameras, he was having an ongoing battle with his four-legged co-star that he simply could not win. Sheen was reportedly a terrible horseback rider who couldn't keep his balance and fell off his horse multiple times during filming, creating unexpected delays and some genuinely dangerous moments on the New Mexico set. The actor's relationship with his horse, named Blaze, was described by Sheen himself. He admitted in interviews that he didn't trust the animal and that Blaze seemed to have it out for him personally, creating what he called a hate-hate relationship between the two of them. The horse appeared to behave perfectly during rehearsals, lulling Sheen into a false sense of security. But the moment the director called action, Blaze would seemingly go rogue and ruin take after take. The most dramatic incident occurred after filming a shootout scene with Henry Hill, when Sheen's horse took off running with the actor still mounted and completely out of control. Sheen had absolutely no idea how to make the horse stop, leaving him helpless as Blaze carried him away from the filming location at full speed. The crew had to chase after them to rescue Sheen, who was clinging on for dear life while his horse ignored all his attempts to regain control. Sheen later joked that Blaze understood the word action and would deliberately misbehave whenever filming began, as if the horse was intentionally trying to sabotage his performance. The actor felt frustrated because he thought he had delivered good energy and performances in several takes, only to have them ruined by his uncooperative mount. During training sessions with the other actors, director Christopher Kane had to yell at the cast to stop horsing around because they were riding too fast and recklessly, with Sheen likely being one of the main culprits who needed the warning. Fact 3. The sheep bedroom prank. When Emilio Estevez was going through a rough patch during filming, his co-star Diamond Phillips decided to lift his spirits with one of the most bizarre pranks in movie history, involving farm animals and professional makeup artists. Estevez had been noticeably depressed throughout the shoot because he had recently broken up with his girlfriend, and his mood was affecting the atmosphere on set in New Mexico. Phillips, who was developing close friendships with his fellow actors during the production, noticed that Estevez needed cheering up and came up with an elaborate plan that required the help of the wardrobe and makeup departments. He convinced the crew members to participate in his unusual scheme by having them apply full makeup and costume treatment to a live sheep, dressing it up as if it were going to appear in a scene from the movie. The prank reached its climax when Phillips and his accomplices managed to get the fully dressed and made-up sheep into Estevez's hotel room without him knowing about it. When Estevez returned to his room after a long day of filming, he discovered the costumed sheep waiting for him, complete with period-appropriate clothing and carefully applied makeup that made the animal look like it belonged on a Wild West movie set. The reaction from Estevez and the aftermath of the prank became legendary among the cast and crew, representing the kind of close-knit, family-like atmosphere that developed during the months of filming in the remote New Mexico locations. The incident showed how the actors were willing to go to extraordinary lengths to support each other through personal difficulties, even if it meant involving livestock, and convincing professional movie crew members to participate in elaborate practical jokes. Phillips later recalled the prank as one of his favorite memories from the production, and it helped cement the lifelong friendships that formed between the young actors during what would become one of the most successful westerns of the 1980s. The sheep prank became part of Young Gun's folklore, demonstrating the playful spirit that existed behind the scenes of this serious western drama. Fact 4. James Horner's rejected Celtic score. One of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes decisions in Young Guns involved completely throwing out an entire musical score by legendary composer James Horner, who had created soundtracks for major films like Aliens and would later win Oscars for Titanic. Horner had been hired by director Christopher Kane, with whom he had previously collaborated on The Stone Boy and Where the River Runs Black, but his vision for the Western's music clashed dramatically with what the studio wanted to hear. Horner composed what he described as a wild Western ride, with driving, restless themes that featured an unusual Celtic flavor, incorporating instruments like bagpipes and penny whistles that were completely unexpected for a traditional American Western. His reasoning was actually quite thoughtful, as he wanted the music to represent both the story's Irish-American characters, particularly the villain Lawrence Murphy, and the English rancher John Tunstall, while still capturing the spirit of the Wild West's great outdoors. The studio executives and producers were horrified when they heard Horner's Celtic-influenced score, considering the bagpipes and Irish folk instruments to be completely out of place for a movie aimed at young American audiences in 1988. They felt that the specifically Irish sound would confuse viewers and detract from the Western atmosphere they were trying to create, even though the music was designed to reflect the actual heritage of several key characters in the story. The rejection forced the production team to scramble for a replacement score just days before the film's release, bringing in composers Anthony Marinelli and Brian Banks to create an entirely new soundtrack in an incredibly short time frame. The replacement score featured a much more traditional Western sound with electric guitar, saxophone, and synthesizer elements that gave the film its distinctive 1980s feel, but Horner's original Celtic Western score remained one of his most unusual and undiscovered works. Horner later described his Young Guns score as one of his most experimental pieces, and portions of it eventually surfaced years later, showing what might have been a completely different musical experience for this Brat Pack Western. Fact 5. Kiefer Sutherland's Baby Stand-In. During one of Young Gun's most memorable sequences, where the regulators travel through a Native American village while high on peyote, eagle-eyed viewers might notice that Doc Scurlock looks different than usual, and there's a very heartwarming reason for this change. Kiefer Sutherland had to leave the set that morning because his wife was giving birth to their child, creating a scheduling crisis for director Christopher Kane and the production team who needed to film the important scene. The peyote sequence was a crucial part of the movie where Chavez leads the gang on a spiritual journey after they've consumed the hallucinogenic cactus, and the scene required all the main characters to appear together as they ride through the village in an altered state of consciousness. Rather than delay filming and lose an entire day of expensive location shooting in New Mexico, the filmmakers decided to use a creative solution that would allow them to continue without their star. If you watch the scene carefully, you'll notice that Doc Scurlock appears at the front of the group with his face almost completely covered by a bandana that's pulled up much higher than normal, concealing everything except his eyes. This mysterious figure riding alongside Billy the Kid and the other regulators is actually a body double who was hired to stand in for Sutherland during this crucial family moment. The production team made sure the substitute looked convincing by dressing him in Sutherland's exact costume and positioning him in a way that would maintain the scene's authenticity while keeping his face hidden. The high bandana serves a dual purpose in the film, as it fits with the mystical, otherworldly atmosphere of the peyote trip, while also providing the perfect cover for the actor substitution. Sutherland's decision to prioritize his family over filming demonstrates the supportive atmosphere on the Young Guns set, where the cast and crew were willing to work around personal emergencies and life-changing moments. The fact that the scene works seamlessly despite the last-minute casting change shows the professionalism and creativity of everyone involved in making the film. Fact 6. The rubber chimney blooper. One of the most unintentionally funny moments in Young Guns happens during the film's climactic gunfight scene, when a supposedly solid brick chimney reveals itself to be anything but sturdy after an accidental bump from Kiefer Sutherland's character. During the intense final battle at Alexander McSween's house, Doc Scurlock stands up quickly in the heat of the moment and accidentally bumps into what should be a heavy, immovable brick chimney structure. Instead of the solid thud you'd expect from someone hitting real masonry, the chimney visibly bounces and wobbles like it's made of rubber or lightweight foam, completely destroying the illusion that the regulators are taking cover in a genuine 19th century adobe house. The blooper is so obvious that once you notice it, it's impossible to ignore, and it stands out dramatically against the serious, life-or-death tone of the surrounding gunfight sequence. The mistake happened because movie sets often use lightweight, flexible materials that look authentic on camera, but are actually designed for safety and practicality rather than realism. The prop chimney was likely constructed from foam, rubber, or other soft materials that could be safely bumped into by actors during the chaotic action sequences without causing injury, but the filmmakers didn't anticipate that it would be hit hard enough to reveal its true nature. The bouncing chimney made it into the final cut of the film, suggesting that either the editors didn't notice the obvious mistake during post-production, or they decided that reshooting the entire complex gunfight sequence would be too expensive and time-consuming to fix such a brief moment. The blooper has become a favorite among movie mistake enthusiasts and eagle-eyed viewers who enjoy spotting continuity errors and prop failures in major Hollywood productions. This type of practical set-building mistake was more common in the 1980s, before computer-generated imagery became sophisticated enough to digitally remove such obvious errors in post-production, leaving audiences with a permanent reminder of the artificial nature of movie magic during one of the film's most dramatic moments. Fact 7. Visible camera tripod mistake. During one of Young Gun's most intense action sequences, a piece of modern filming equipment accidentally photobombed the Wild West, creating one of the most glaring continuity mistakes in the entire movie. The error occurs during the dramatic shootout with Buckshot Roberts, the seasoned bounty hunter played by Brian Keith. When the regulators find themselves in a deadly gun battle, that ultimately claims the life of their leader Dick Brewer. As Charlie Sheen's character takes refuge behind a woodpile during the firefight, careful viewers can spot a clearly visible camera tripod standing in the background on the right side of the screen, completely out of place in what's supposed to be an 1870s New Mexico landscape. The tripod appears to be a standard piece of film equipment that was accidentally left in position when the cameras started rolling, and somehow made it through the entire editing process without anyone catching the obvious mistake. The Buckshot Roberts shootout is a pivotal moment in the film where the regulators face their most dangerous opponent yet, a grizzled veteran gunfighter who barricades himself in an outhouse and manages to kill Dick Brewer before the gang finally takes him down. The sequence was designed to show the brutal reality of frontier justice and the deadly consequences of the regulators' vigilante activities, making the presence of modern camera equipment particularly jarring for viewers trying to stay immersed in the period setting. The tripod mistake represents the kind of production oversight that was more common in pre-digital filmmaking, when crews had to be extremely careful about keeping modern equipment out of camera range, and editors had limited options for removing unwanted objects during post-production. Unlike today's movies where such errors can be digitally erased, 1980s films like Young Guns were stuck with whatever ended up on the original film negative. The visible tripod has become a favorite discovery among movie mistake hunters and fans who enjoy spotting the technical errors that reveal the artificial nature of filmmaking, turning what should be a dramatic moment of violence into an unintentional reminder of the cameras and crew surrounding the actors. Fact 8. The anachronistic geek usage. Young Guns contains a glaring historical language error that reveals how difficult it can be for modern screenwriters to avoid using contemporary slang when writing period dialogue. During the early part of the film, when Billy the Kid is first being introduced to the other regulators at John Tunstall's ranch, one of the characters explains the group's standards by telling him that you can't be any geek off the street, using a term that wouldn't exist for several more decades. The problem with this line is that the word geek in any form wasn't actually coined until around 1915, which places its invention roughly 37 years after the events depicted in Young Guns, which are set during the Lincoln County War of 1878. The term originally referred to carnival performers who would bite the heads off live chickens or perform other grotesque acts for entertainment, and it didn't evolve into its modern meaning of an awkward or socially inept person until much later in the 20th century. This type of linguistic mistake is surprisingly common in period films, where writers and actors naturally slip into using familiar modern expressions without realizing they're breaking the historical authenticity of their dialogue. The word geek sounds so natural and timeless to contemporary ears that it's easy to forget it has a specific origin point in American slang history, making it the kind of error that can easily slip past script supervisors and historical consultants. The anachronistic usage stands out particularly because Young Guns was generally praised by historians for being more historically accurate than previous Billy the Kid films, with screenwriter John Fusco having spent months researching the actual events and people involved in the Lincoln County War. The fact that such a careful production still included this obvious language mistake shows how challenging it can be to maintain perfect period authenticity when creating dialogue that needs to sound natural to modern audiences. The geek line has become a favorite example among movie mistake enthusiasts who specialize in catching historical inaccuracies, representing the ongoing tension between historical accuracy and contemporary accessibility in period filmmaking. Fact 9. Horse Wrangler's hand exposed. During the trippy peyote sequence where the regulators are experiencing hallucinations in the desert, a careful observer can catch a glimpse of modern movie magic that completely breaks the illusion of the Wild West setting. The mistake happens when Dirty Steve, played by Dermot Mulroney, asks his horse if it saw the size of a giant chicken he's hallucinating, then fires his shotgun into the air while still mounted on his horse. The moment Dirty Steve pulls the trigger, his horse naturally jerks its head back in reaction to the loud gunshot, which would be expected behavior for any animal startled by such a sudden noise. However, if you watch closely during this reaction, you can clearly see a crew member's hand come into the frame to grab the horse's reins and keep the animal under control, revealing that there was a horse wrangler positioned just out of camera range to ensure the safety of both the actor and the horse during filming. The peyote scene was already one of the most challenging sequences to film because it required the actors to portray characters under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs while performing on horseback in the New Mexico desert. Adding gunfire to this already complex setup created additional safety concerns that required extra precautions from the animal handlers and stunt coordinators working on the production. The visible hand represents the kind of safety measure that's absolutely necessary when filming scenes involving both weapons and animals, but it's also the type of detail that film crews work hard to keep hidden from audiences. The fact that the hand made it into the final cut suggests that the editors either didn't notice the mistake during post-production, or they decided that the brief appearance wasn't significant enough to warrant reshooting what was probably an expensive and difficult sequence to capture. This type of crew visibility error was more common in 1980s filmmaking, before digital technology made it easier to remove unwanted elements from shots during post-production, leaving viewers with a permanent reminder of the safety protocols happening just outside the camera's view. Fact 10. Lou Diamond Phillips' height fear. What looks like a deliberately slow, mystical performance during one of Young Gun's most memorable scenes was actually the result of Lou Diamond Phillips dealing with a very real and terrifying phobia that affected his ability to perform certain stunts. During the peyote sequence where Chavez leads the other regulators on a spiritual journey through the desert, Phillips' character is seen moving very carefully and slowly across rocky terrain, which many viewers interpreted as part of his portrayal of someone under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs. However, the cautious, deliberate movements weren't entirely acting choices designed to show the effects of peyote on his character. Phillips was genuinely scared of heights, and the rocky desert locations in New Mexico required him to climb and move across elevated stone formations that triggered his acrophobia, making what should have been a relatively simple scene into a personal challenge for the actor. The fear of heights created an interesting situation where Phillips's real emotional state actually enhanced his performance, as his genuine nervousness and careful movements perfectly matched what you might expect from someone experiencing altered consciousness in an unfamiliar and potentially dangerous environment. The slow, measured way he navigates the rocks reads as both spiritual reverence and drug-induced caution, when in reality it was largely motivated by his desire to avoid falling from the elevated desert formations. Phillips later acknowledged his height phobia in interviews, explaining how certain scenes in various films presented challenges that went beyond just memorizing lines and hitting marks. The fact that he was able to complete the peyote sequence despite his fear demonstrates his professionalism and commitment to the role, even when it meant confronting a personal phobia in front of cameras and crew members. The scene works so well that most viewers never suspect that Phillips was dealing with genuine fear rather than simply channeling his character's altered state of consciousness, showing how sometimes an actor's real vulnerabilities can accidentally improve their performance and add unexpected authenticity to a fictional moment. Fact 11. Wrong song for wrong era. Young Guns contains not one but two major musical anachronisms that place songs from completely different time periods into the 1870s setting, creating some of the most glaring historical errors in the entire film. The first mistake occurs during the cantina scene where men are heard singing, "When Irish eyes are smiling, a popular Irish-American song that sounds perfectly appropriate for a frontier saloon filled with Irish immigrants and cowboys looking for entertainment. The problem is that When Irish Eyes Are Smiling wasn't actually written until 1912, which means the cantina patrons are singing a song that wouldn't exist for another 34 years after the events depicted in the movie. The song was composed by Chauncey Olcott and George Graff Jr. with music by Ernest Ball, who was ironically born in the same year that the Lincoln County War took place, making it impossible for him to have written the melody that the characters are enthusiastically performing. The second musical mistake is even more dramatic in terms of its historical gap, occurring when Billy the Kid whistles what's described as a sad ballad to signal his identity to bounty hunter Texas Joe Grant in the cantina. The tune that Emilio Estevez whistles is actually Mna Naa Eirean, which translates to Women of Ireland, a traditional Irish melody that was arranged and popularized by composer Cian O'Riordan in the early 1960s. This means that Billy is whistling a song that wouldn't be written for approximately 84 years after his supposed death, creating an anachronism so severe that it spans from the Wild West era all the way into the modern civil rights movement. The song choice was probably intended to add an Irish flavor that would connect with the film's themes about Irish-American characters like Lawrence Murphy, but the filmmakers apparently didn't research the actual origins of the melodies they selected. These musical errors demonstrate how even well-researched period films can stumble when it comes to selecting appropriate songs, especially when the chosen melodies sound authentically old-fashioned to contemporary ears but actually have much more recent origins than their traditional style might suggest. Fact 12. The real Chivato, meaning mystery. Throughout Young Guns, Jose Chavez repeatedly calls Billy the Kid Chivato, and while it sounds like a term of endearment between close friends, the actual meaning of this Spanish word creates a confusing contradiction that has puzzled viewers and language experts for decades. The problem stems from the fact that Chivato has multiple meanings in Spanish, and depending on which definition you use, Chavez is either expressing deep affection for Billy or calling him something much more insulting. In some regions, particularly in northern Mexico near the Chihuahua area, Chivato refers to a young male goat, and it's commonly used as an affectionate nickname for a young person who's full of energy and mischief. This meaning would make perfect sense given the close friendship between Chavez and Billy, as it would be similar to calling someone kid in English, which happens to be exactly what Billy the Kid was known as throughout his life. However, in many other Spanish-speaking regions and in modern usage, Chivato means something completely different and much more negative: a traitor, snitch, or informant who betrays their friends to authorities. If Chavez is using this meaning, then he's essentially calling Billy a rat or backstabber throughout the entire movie, which would make absolutely no sense given their loyal partnership and the fact that they're constantly referred to as pals who would die for each other. The confusion becomes even more complicated when you consider that Lincoln County, New Mexico, was close to the Texas-Mexico border region, where both meanings of the word would have been understood by Spanish speakers in the 1870s. Some viewers familiar with southwestern Spanish dialects have suggested that Chavez is using the term in its original sense of young goat, playing on the fact that a baby goat is literally a kid, making it a clever bilingual pun on Billy's famous nickname. The scriptwriter John Fusco likely intended the affectionate meaning, but the dual nature of the word has created ongoing debates among fans about whether Chavez is being loving or insulting throughout their friendship, adding an unintentional layer of linguistic mystery to their relationship. Fact 13. Director's family connection. Young Guns contains not one but two surprising family connections that linked the film to future television superheroes and Hollywood dynasties in ways that most viewers never realized. The first connection involves director Christopher Kane, who would later become known to television audiences as the stepfather of Dean Cain, the actor who played Superman in the popular 1990s series Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. At the time Young Guns was filmed in 1988, Dean Cain was still years away from donning the cape and becoming one of television's most recognizable superheroes, but his stepfather Christopher was already establishing himself as a skilled director of action films and westerns. The family connection means that Superman's TV dad was the man behind the camera directing this Brat Pack western, creating an unexpected link between the world of frontier justice and superhero adventures. The second family connection is even more direct and visible in the film itself, involving the legendary actor Jack Palance, who plays the menacing villain Lawrence Murphy. Palance's real-life son, Cody Palance, appears in the movie as a character named Baker, giving audiences the rare opportunity to see a famous father and son acting together on screen, even though they don't share any scenes directly. Jack Palance was already a Hollywood icon by the time Young Guns was made, known for his intimidating screen presence in classic westerns like Sheen, and his distinctive gravelly voice that made him perfect for playing villains. Having his son Cody appear in the film alongside him represents the kind of family filmmaking tradition that was more common in earlier Hollywood eras, where studio connections often helped family members get roles in major productions. The presence of both the Cain and Palance family connections shows how Young Guns served as a meeting point for different generations of Hollywood talent, bringing together established stars like Jack Palance with up-and-coming directors like Christopher Kane, while also providing opportunities for the next generation of actors to get their start in the entertainment industry through family connections and mentorship relationships. Fact 14. Sean Penn's jail substitute. The role of Billy the Kid that made Emilio Estevez a Western star was originally intended for a completely different actor whose legal troubles ended up changing the entire trajectory of Young Guns. Sean Penn was the first choice to play the legendary outlaw, but his well-documented conflicts with the paparazzi and his tendency toward violent confrontations with photographers ultimately cost him what could have been one of his most memorable roles. According to Diamond Phillips, who revealed this casting secret years later, Penn was unable to accept the part because he was serving jail time for punching a photographer, one of several incidents that earned him a reputation as one of Hollywood's most volatile young stars. Penn's famous temper and his ongoing battles with the media had finally caught up with him at exactly the wrong moment, forcing the producers to look elsewhere for their Billy the Kid. The timing of Penn's legal troubles was particularly unfortunate because the late 1980s represented the peak of his early career, when he was considered one of the most talented and intense actors of his generation. His performances in films like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and At Close Range had established him as a serious dramatic actor who could have brought a darker, more psychologically complex interpretation to the Billy the Kid character. When Penn became unavailable, the role went to Emilio Estevez, who brought a completely different energy and interpretation to the character that emphasized Billy's charm, humor, and unpredictable nature, rather than the brooding intensity that Penn might have delivered. The casting change ultimately worked out perfectly for the film, as Estevez's performance became one of his most iconic roles and helped establish Young Guns as a successful ensemble piece rather than a star vehicle. The irony of Penn losing the role due to his real-life violent behavior while trying to play one of the Wild West's most famous gunfighters wasn't lost on industry observers, who noted that his off-screen troubles had cost him the chance to channel his aggressive tendencies into a legitimate creative outlet that might have been perfect for his personality and acting style. Fact 15. the drunk, La Bamba ritual. After long days of filming in the New Mexico desert, the Young Guns cast developed a unique bonding tradition that involved alcohol, singing, and repeatedly putting Diamond Phillips on the spot to perform one of his most famous career moments. The actors would regularly gather together in the evenings to drink and socialize, creating the kind of close friendships that would last for decades after the cameras stopped rolling. But their idea of entertainment always seemed to center around one particular musical request. Whenever the group had been drinking and the mood got loose and silly, they would inevitably pressure Phillips to sing La Bamba, the hit song that had made him famous just 1 year earlier when he played rock and roll legend Ritchie Valens in the biographical film of the same name. The 1987 movie La Bamba had been Phillips' breakthrough role and had established him as a rising star in Hollywood. But it also meant that everywhere he went, people associated him with that specific performance. The nightly ritual became so predictable that Phillips knew exactly what was coming whenever his castmates started getting intoxicated and looking in his direction with mischievous grins. Despite probably getting tired of performing the same song over and over again, Phillips was apparently a good sport about the repeated requests and would comply with his friends' demands to recreate his star-making moment from the previous year's hit film. The tradition reveals the playful, fraternal atmosphere that existed among the young actors during filming, showing how they genuinely enjoyed each other's company and weren't afraid to engage in the kind of good-natured ribbing that close friends often do. The fact that they kept requesting the same performance night after night also demonstrates how proud they were of Phillips' success and how much they enjoyed celebrating his previous achievement, even if it meant putting him through the same routine repeatedly. This type of cast bonding was typical of many 80s ensemble films, where young actors would form tight-knit groups during extended location shoots, creating memories and friendships that often outlasted the films themselves and contributed to the authentic chemistry that audiences could see on screen.